This tip of the week was prompted by an email I got from someone who wanted to know how I did applied I-cords, and I was ashamed to admit I never use applied I-cords because I can't get them to ever look right. They just look sloppy and nasty, and there's always a show through, and if I do it in a different color, and I just avoid them if I can. What I do instead requires a lot more work, which if anybody who knows me shouldn't be surprised. It's kind of how I roll. But I like the results better. It gives a tighter way to cover an edge, and it also can be used for a variety of things. And to do this, you do a double pickup of a band, and this is something I teach in courses. And it's a way that you can cover both sides, cover this up, and it's good for reversible things, and there are tons of ways to use it, and this is just one. I'm going to start by pointing out I've got two different needle sizes, and I've gone to some effort to use two different types of needles so that I'll be able to tell them apart. And one is very small, or smallish. It's 2.75, and this one is a 6. And it's necessary to use a larger size for the stitches that are going to appear on the right side, and a smaller size for stitches that are going to appear on the wrong side, and we'll talk about that in a minute. Now, to get started, you just pick up a stitch like you normally would, and once that first stitch is picked up, you lay the smaller needle behind the big needle, and I'm going to insert the big needle as if I'm going to pick up a stitch, and instead of just wrapping the yarn around one, I'm going to wrap it around both, and I'm going to pull the yarn through. I insert my needle and I pull the yarn through, and once you've got a couple of stitches, that second needle stays in place. Now, I'd like you to notice that there are 3 stitches on the front needle and 2 on the back. It's important that you always have exactly 1 stitch less on the wrong side. If you don't, it's not going to turn out right. I'm going to go through, and you can see that once you've got this set up, it's fairly easy to get in a rhythm. It's a little, complicated. Whoops. See, now there, I didn't do it. And if that happens, make sure before you go too far. I frequently count my stitches as I go along to make sure that I'm not missing one, because it's a real pain if you do. Over both the needles, pull it through, insert, insert, insert. Now, it's required that you use circular needles for this. You cannot do this with a flat needle. And did I get that last one? I may not have. Let's count. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Yes. Now, once I've got my stitches on the front and the back, I'm going to work in the round to work a couple of rounds on the right side and on the wrong side until I've covered up my bind off edge. And to do that, my working yarn is over here on this side. So I want to work these stitches, and this needle back here is making that difficult, so I'm going to slide it so that I have a cable there, and I'll be able to work these stitches. Now, this is why you need a smaller size needle. If you're using needles of equal sizes, there's going to be a lot of slack in these 2 rows, and you want to keep it as tight as possible, which is why you're using a smaller needle. I want to make sure that I'm using my working yarn and the small needles. I don't want to use the large needles. You want to make sure that I'm working the stitches on the back with the small needles and working the stitches on the front with the larger needles. And I've got this one. Now I need to turn my work to work the stitches on the front, and I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to slide the stitches on the back needle to the cable so that I can work these stitches. Slide my needle around, doing a lot of kind of magic looping here. Make sure that I've got my large needle, and again, that's one reason why I tend to use 2 different types of needle for this. And the thing you want to avoid when you're on this side is not to use the yarn tail. It's real easy to work around with the yarn tail, and then you discover too late, have to undo it. So make sure you've got your working yarn. And awkward with all these needles here. Okay, now I continue on in this fashion until I have worked enough rows to cover that bind off edge or selvage edge if you're working it on the side of a piece. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to pause the video to do that, and I'll come back when I'm ready to do the final step. Okay, I'm back, and I've worked enough rows so that on the front and the back so that my bind off edge is encased, or it will be encased when I'm finished. Now at this point I've got choices. If I wanted this to look like an I-cord, meaning just a tightly compact edging around this, I would Kitchener stitch. Kitchener stitch is the best way. It would just make this look like a continuous round piece. And what it really looks like is where you have seen people that knit and then fold it over and then hem it on the other side. But this is a neater neater way to do that. This is how it looks on the wrong side. This is how it looks on the right side. I could do that, or I can bind off. Now when you bind off, you've got a couple of choices. If I bind off knitwise, I'm going to, hey George, hey Georgie. If I bind off knitwise, my bind off is going to be folded, oh shoot, sorry, my cat's bugging me. It will have the bind off edge facing this way. If I bind off purlwise, it's going to be facing the other way, except there'll be a slight purl ridge there. Or if I bind off knitwise, purlwise, knitwise, purlwise, it will have the bind off chain on top. So those are some choices I have, and in my blog I've got photos of those different ways. But I'm just going to bind off knitwise. Now to do this, I then remember I've got one extra stitch here. I work that first stitch and pull it off, and then this I can just work like a 3-needle bind off. Now if I wanted to continue on with a band here and have ribbing or knit or whatever, I would just, instead of doing the bind off, I would knit the 2 stitches together and then just have the band. But I'm going to actually do a bind off, so I'm knitting those 2 guys together, I pull them off, and then I bind them off. Knit the 2 together, bind off. And I've done this on a variety of projects. As I said, I really don't like a pied I-cord. That's just me. If you can work one that looks nice, more power to you. I've just never been able to do it. And so you just continue on in this way until you're done. And again, anytime you do a 3-needle bind off, it's going to be a little, you're dealing with 3 needles, so it's going to be a bit awkward, but once you're done. Now if you had the same number of stitches or 2 more on the front, this band would be slanted when you perform this last step. So it's very important you have 1 stitch more and you work the stitch on the front side first, and then you're done. And so you can see that this gives you a nice little edging here. And it's kind of decorative. Now again, if you want it to look like an I-cord where it's smooth all around, you would have Kitchenered those stitches. But it is a nice effect for something that's reversible, or where the front part is going to stay open. That's a nicer edge than just a plain old pickup.